In the heart of Perugia, Italy, where the cobblestone streets echoed with centuries of stories, a darker tale was unfolding. Within the cold stone walls of the courthouse, Amanda Knox, an eager American student, found herself at the center of a high-stakes battle for her future. What had started as an exciting semester abroad, filled with dreams and adventure, now spiraled into a nightmare she never could have imagined. The trial began with a tense silence, the courtroom brimming with anticipation as the prosecution prepared to deliver its opening salvo. "Look at her," the prosecutor said, gesturing toward Knox with a chilling tone. "She may look innocent, but behind that facade lies a who brutally took the life of her roommate, Meredith Kircher." The words struck like a thunderclap, reverberating through the silent room. Knox's blue eyes locked onto the prosecutors, a mixture of fear and defiance shining through. As the case unfolded, the courtroom became a battleground, each side fiercely fighting for control of the narrative. Knox's defense attorney, Carlo Dalla Vedova, stood tall and unwavering, his voice calm yet determined as he took on the charges.
Amanda is very upset, and from the outcome of this hearing, she was looking to have a final.
"My client is not guilty," he declared, his words slicing through the tension like a knife. "She is the victim of a flawed investigation and a broken system. There is no evidence, no motive, and no reason to convict her." But the prosecutor, relentless in his pursuit, countered with accusations that painted Knox as a cold-hearted. "You heard it from her own lips," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "She confessed, didn't she? She said she was there. She said she Meredith Kircher." The courtroom gasped. The infamous confession, later revealed to be coerced under duress, hung in the air like a dark cloud. Knox, her voice trembling, took the stand, her eyes red with emotion. "I didn't do it," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was scared. The police, they hit me. They told me I was lying. I was pressured into saying things I didn't mean." Her words echoed in the courtroom, and for a moment, the room was still.
"We now respectfully ask you to give Amanda and the rest of our family our privacy that we need to recover from this horrible ordeal."
The judge, a stern figure sitting high above, leaned forward. "And what exactly did you say, Miss Knox?" he asked, his tone both stern and probing. "I said I was there, but it's not true," Knox replied, her voice breaking. "I didn't Meredith. I didn't do anything." The prosecutor, not to be outdone, turned his attention to her boyfriend, Rafael Solicito, sitting nearby. "And what about him?" he asked, his voice a sharp edge. "You two were together that night. Are we to believe that he too is innocent? That this was all some misunderstanding?" Solicito, his face pale, could only watch in silence as the prosecutor twisted their relationship into something sinister, accusing them of committing in a fueled haze. The defense was quick to respond, challenging the very foundation of the prosecution's case. "Where is the evidence?" Dalla Vedova demanded. "Where is the proof that links my client to this crime? You have none. All you have is a coerced confession and a baseless speculation." The tension in the courtroom was palpable. The defense attorney's words rang out, and for a moment, it seemed as if the tide might turn in Knox's favor. But then, the prosecutor delivered his final blow.
Because it's a big mistake. There's a principle of law that you need evidence. There's no evidence here, so we're very confident that this will be accepted and recognized by the court.
"This is not just about facts," he said, his voice rising. "This is about a young woman who got caught in her lies. She wanted to be part of something, but she ended up being part of a." The judge's gavel echoed through the room, signaling the end of the trial. "The jury has reached a verdict," the judge announced, his voice heavy. "Guilty as charged. 26 years in prison." Knox collapsed in her seat, her eyes wide with disbelief. "No!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "No! This can't be happening!" The verdict seemed like the final chapter in a tragic story, but the real drama was just beginning. The legal battle would continue for years, with new evidence emerging to challenge the conviction. Experts would uncover errors in the forensic evidence, revealing contamination and mishandling of key samples. It was a legal roller coaster that would stretch on for nearly a decade, until, in a dramatic twist, the highest court in Italy declared both Knox and Solicito innocent. The case had been filled with stunning flaws, the judges remarked, and they had been wrongly convicted.
What's important for me to say is just thank you to everyone who's believed in me, who's defended me, who's supported my family.
Yet, as Knox and Solicito walked free, The scars of the trial remained. The courtroom, once a place where justice was supposed to prevail, had been a stage for one of the most sensationalized trials in history. And even as the dust settled, the questions lingered. Was justice ever truly served? Was Knox the victim of a corrupt system, or a tragic figure in a case that was never fully understood? This courtroom drama would haunt the halls of justice for years to come, as the world watched and wondered, in the pursuit of truth, how many innocent lives could be destroyed. In the ancient somber halls of Perugia's courthouse, Amanda Knox faced her accusers, the weight of the world pressing down on her young shoulders. At 20 years old, the Seattle native, once just an eager exchange student chasing adventure in Italy, now stood at the center of a media storm, accused of committing one of the most gruesome Italy had ever seen. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the prosecutor leaned forward, his voice low and dripping with accusation.
They'll have to catch me and pull me back, kicking and screaming, into a prison that I don't deserve to be in.
Look at her, he said, gesturing toward Knox with a malicious sneer. The face of an angel. But behind that facade lies the heart of a. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and the eyes of the room turned towards Knox, whose piercing blue eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. She sat motionless, her fate hanging in the balance as they painted her as a ruthless responsible for the death of her British roommate, Meredith Kircher. Knox's defense attorney, Carlo Dalla Vedova, rose to counter. His calm demeanor was in stark contrast to the prosecutor's fiery accusations. Your Honor, we are not here to convict someone based on appearances or assumptions. The only thing we are here to judge is the evidence, of which there is none. His words were firm, challenging the very foundation of the prosecution's case. The prosecutor, not yet finished, continued his assault. You heard it from her own lips, he said, turning toward the jury. She confessed. She was there. She participated in the. His eyes locked onto Knox's, as though daring her to deny it. Knox stood up shakily and took the stand. She steadied herself, forcing words past trembling lips in broken Italian.
They're reminding me to speak in English, because I'm having problems with that.
I am innocent, she declared. But the courtroom was not so easily swayed. A chilling silence followed, broken only by the prosecutor's sharp retort. Your words mean nothing, he sneered. How do you explain the confession you made? How do you explain the lies you told? What's the truth? The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. The prosecutor's voice rang through the room. You told us you were there. You admitted to being part of the crime. But now, you stand here denying it all. Why should we believe you? He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Knox's gaze dropped, recalling the haunting interrogation that led to her false confession. She choked back tears, her voice barely a whisper. The police hit me, she said, her voice trembling with the raw emotion of the moment. They told me I was a stupid liar. They said I was guilty. I didn't know what to say. I was scared. I just wanted it to end. Gasps filled the room. It was as if the entire courtroom had held its breath, waiting for the truth to break free from the web of lies. The defense attorney stood, shaking his head in disbelief. Your Honor, he began, addressing the judge directly. How can this confession be used against her when it was extracted under duress? This is a clear violation of her rights. The prosecutor's response was sharp. What about the evidence? What about the DNA? What about the blood on her hands? The defense countered. There was no conclusive DNA evidence linking my client to the crime scene. The prosecution's claims are based on speculation, not facts. Her boyfriend, Rafael Soyacito, sat nearby, his eyes filled with sorrow, as the prosecutor twisted their once innocent relationship into something far darker. You two were lovers, the prosecutor taunted, a cruel smile curling his lips. A romance turned deadly, a fueled game gone wrong. This is your reality. This is the truth. Rafael shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The air in the room was thick with tension, as the prosecutor's accusations echoed in every corner. The judge, a stern figure behind the bench, leaned in, his voice cold and calculating. The prosecution has laid its case, but where is the proof? His tone was sharp, but measured. Where is the hard evidence? It seems that the only thing we have here is a confession that doesn't match the facts. His words lingered, and the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a move that shifted the entire case, the defense attorney made his boldest play yet. I request permission to call the lead prosecutor to the stand, Dalla Vedova said, his voice steady but commanding. The room fell silent in disbelief as the prosecutor,
who's defended me, who's supported my family,
reluctantly agreed. Clarence Darrow, the defense lawyer, turned toward the prosecutor, his voice cutting through the tension. "Do you believe in the infallibility of the system?" Darrow asked. The prosecutor hesitated, his eyes darting around the courtroom. "I do," he said, his tone faltering. Darrow's eyes locked onto him, like a lion eyeing its prey. "Then answer me this," he said, leaning in. "What is the truth when the evidence is unreliable and the confession coerced under duress? Do you believe in truth, or do you believe in maintaining a lie to save face?" The prosecutor stood, stammering as he tried to respond. I believe in justice." But it was clear the foundation of his case was crumbling. Then came the bombshell, the verdict. The judge's voice rang through the room.
Speaking deliberately in Italian, the judge rejected claims,
Each word hanging like a guillotine waiting to fall. 26 years in prison, the judge declared, his voice reverberating through the silent room. Amanda Knox, utterly stunned, crumpled in her seat, her body shaking with disbelief. "No! No! No!" she screamed, her anguished cries echoing through the courtroom, the sound of a young woman's life being torn apart. Her cries filled the room, but they were met with only cold indifference from the prosecutor. He remained unmoved, his steely expression betraying no emotion. The defense attorney, however, clenched his fists in frustration. He knew this was far from the end. But that was not the end. What followed was a legal battle that would span 8 long years, testing the boundaries of justice and the integrity of the investigation. Experts would later dismantle the prosecution's case, revealing damning flaws, contaminated DNA samples, mishandled evidence, and an investigation riddled with errors. The final act unfolded in Italy's highest court. The judges, after examining the staggering flaws in the case, declared Amanda Knox and Rafael Solicito innocent. "The investigation was deeply flawed," one judge remarked, shaking his head in disbelief. "What we have here are stunning flaws in both the evidence and the handling of this case. These two are innocent." And just like that, the courtroom erupted in disbelief. The once convicted were now free, but the damage was done. Their lives would never be the same. The prosecutor, his face pale and shaking, managed a final, defeated look toward the defense. "You've won," he his voice barely audible. The defense attorney, standing tall, responded, "Justice has won." So what strikes you about this case? The flawed forensics that nearly sent an innocent woman to prison, or the speed with which the public turned a student into a criminal? Was justice truly served in the end, or was it simply exhausted by years of courtroom drama, media frenzy, and public spectacle? The truth, it seems, is far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The courtroom tension was palpable, every moment more dramatic than the last. The jury sat, eyes fixed on the opposing side. The famous aviator, Charles Lindbergh, appeared as stoic as ever, his presence a stark reminder of the national obsession over his son's disappearance. On the other side, Bruno Hauptmann sat, a lone figure at the defense table, his face drawn and wary, his hands clenched in front of him. As the trial progressed, the defense team began to peel back layers of the prosecution's case, searching for any sliver of doubt they could exploit. Edward Riley, Hauptmann's defense attorney, had his moment when he questioned the validity of the evidence. "Mr. Wildest," Riley said, turning toward the prosecutor with a sharp edge to his voice, "you present this ladder, these pieces of wood, as undeniable proof. But is it truly as straightforward as you suggest? Is it not possible that someone else could have built a similar ladder using similar materials?" Wildest was quick to respond, though his composure seemed a little shaken. "The match is specific, Mr. Riley, and the fact that the defendant had access to such materials is more than a coincidence." Riley was relentless, however. "And yet," he said, pausing to let the words sink in, "how is it that no one in this courtroom can definitively say that these pieces of wood were exclusively used by Hauptmann? No one can produce records. No one can confirm that no one else in the entire state of New Jersey could have had access to these very same materials." The audience held its breath, awaiting Wildest's response, but the prosecutor remained calm. "The fact remains, Mr. Riley. The evidence is damning. This is not conjecture. These are facts." The room grew heavy with the weight of their exchange, and the trial seemed to stretch on, each argument layered with new complexity. But it was not just the physical evidence that loomed large. It was the emotional weight of Charles Lindbergh himself. As a witness, Lindbergh's testimony became a moment of undeniable gravity.
The eyes of the world are on a New Jersey courthouse.
Lindbergh's voice rang out with emotion as he recalled the night of the kidnapping. "I had been told to wait," he said, his voice steady but strained. "I was prepared to drop the money, to save my son, but the voice on the phone, his voice, I'll never forget it. It was the voice of the man who took my child. I knew it then, and I know it now." Riley, ever the sharp cross-examiner, moved in. "Mr. Lindbergh, with all due respect, you're a man of immense fame and pressure. Is it possible your memory is clouded by emotion, by the grief of that moment?" Lindbergh's gaze never wavered. "I know what I heard," he replied firmly, his eyes locking with Hauptmann's. "I know who was on the other end of that phone." As the trial raged on, it became increasingly clear that the stakes were not only about justice for a lost child, but about something much bigger: the need for closure. For a nation devastated by the brutal crime, the trial became a lifeline, and the pursuit of truth was as much about satisfying the public as it was about the facts of the case.
Bruno Hauptmann, a German carpenter, is on trial for his life.
But it wasn't just the emotional drama of the courtroom that made this case so compelling. It was the haunting presence of the Lindbergh family itself. The child, the kidnapped baby, loomed over every witness and every testimony. Though the family's pain was evident, their sorrow seemed to only fuel the courtroom frenzy, as if everyone, prosecutor, defense, and jury, knew they were playing a part in something much larger than the life of one man. Finally, after weeks of legal sparring, the time came for the jury to deliberate. The tension in the air was suffocating as the jury filed out of the room to deliberate on the fate of Bruno Hauptmann. Every person in that courtroom knew the significance of the verdict to come. Would it be closure for the Lindbergh family, or would it be another chapter in a case that never seemed to have a resolution? After 11 hours of deliberation, the foreman stood. "We have reached a decision," he said, his voice heavy with finality. The room fell into a deep silence as the judge asked, "What is your verdict?"
Mr. Riley, counsel for the defense, begins the day by asking Hauptmann how he feels.
"Guilty, Your Honor. We find the defendant, Bruno Richard Hauptmann, guilty of the first degree." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The Lindberghs remained silent, their faces betraying the pain of both the loss and the verdict. Hauptmann's expression was unreadable. Though a flicker of disbelief flashed across his eyes, he turned toward his defense team, his hands trembling slightly. "I didn't do it," Hauptmann under his breath, his words almost lost in the hum of the courtroom. "I swear I didn't do it." But the die was cast. The verdict was in. Hauptmann was guilty. As the weeks passed, public opinion continued to surge in favor of Hauptmann's innocence, but the legal system was unyielding. Appeals were filed, and petitions for clemency flooded in, but in the end, they fell on deaf ears. On the night of April 3rd, 1936, Bruno Hauptmann was executed by electrocution. His last words were,
"Now here's the prisoner, the man whose arrest brings to a head the relentless hunt for the abductors of the Lindbergh baby.
I am innocent. I did not kidnap or the Lindbergh baby." His voice echoed through the history books, a reminder of the complexity and tragedy of a case that left no room for certainty. The Lindbergh baby kidnapping trial would forever be etched in history as a tale of tragedy, justice, and unanswered questions. Even as time marched on, the question remained, was Bruno Hauptmann truly guilty, or was he the victim of a system desperate for closure? The truth, as in many high-profile cases, remains elusive, leaving the world to wonder what really happened that night in March 1932.